Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Paranormal Rangers. And today, John and I are going to be the only two on, but we do have a guest coming on here in a second. I'm going to introduce her. Hi, John. How's it going?
Oh, I'm doing good.
Good.
Everything over here is business as usual. No abductions, no UFO sightings. Everything's good.
And no coins.
And no coins.
And no coins. Hey, today Stan is having technical difficulties. There are strong winds in the area that he lives, so he can't get on today. So he made himself an excuse not to be on the show today. But we have somebody coming on, and her name is Mindy Tautfest. She's a published author, speaker, television personality, and the curator of the Hayden C. Hewes International UFO Bureau, which was founded in Oklahoma City in 1957. And she is going to talk about that organization. And also, this is the board members. And I happen to be on one of the boards. We are so proud to have her on our show. I want to welcome Mindy Tautfest. Hi, Mindy.
Hello. Thank you guys for having me. And Michelle, you look beautiful as always, but it's so wonderful to see that top row of us women there representing the Bureau.
Yes.
And, oh, it warms my heart. And I wanted to also add in that Mr. John Dover here is over all of the indigenous reports that are coming in to the Bureau as well. So both of you are just huge people in my eyes. I couldn't thank you enough for all that you're bringing to the Bureau. And just as we rebuild it and relaunch it from what Hayden originally put together back in 1957, I think he would be proud of what we've done.
Well, thank you, Mindy. You have resurrected something that's been needed, to capture stories and databases of people's understanding of the UFO world and to share in a safe place. And I think that's why you started this organization, so that we had a safe place to bring the stories to and archive them. And if you would like to tell a little bit about some of the famous people that you've investigated through that Bureau, I'll give you the mic.
Okay. Well, I'll back up just a bit and give a little bit of history on the Bureau, if you don't mind.
Sure.
It was started, like I said, it was started by Hayden Hewes back in 57, and he was actually a teenager at the time. He was like 14 or so. And he had written a letter to the premier of Russia at the time. This was during the Cold War. He wrote straight to Russia. He had found that they had sent probes up and that they had taken pictures of the backside of the moon. And so it was Nikita, and I always say his name wrong, Khrushchev, that that he wrote to. And my husband's probably over there shaking his head at me because of his heritage. But so he wrote to him, and surprisingly enough, Nikita wrote back to him and sent him a thing. I still have the original letter and the original envelope that he sent to Hayden. Well, of course, this piqued the FBI's interest, and he had a knock at the door by what he thought was the Men in Black. And his mother opened the door, and they were like, "We need to speak to Hayden Hewes." And she's like, "My 14-year-old?" And they said, "Yeah, if he was sending letters over to Russia, we definitely need to speak to him." And so he did. He had a meeting with the FBI/Men in Black, or whoever this was that came to visit him. And it really spurred his interest from then on, the rest of his life. And so he and a high school friend actually started the International UFO Bureau as teenagers. And they would write to people and ask them, astronauts and stuff, what's your thoughts on UFOs? And these people would write back to him. Sometimes they'd write back and say, "Buzz off, kid. We don't have anything to say to you." But 9 times out of 10, they would actually respond and just say, "I don't have any thoughts on it," or they would actually, share their in-depth thoughts. And so he got some very amazing things. He got, I'm trying to think of the astronaut's name, and it's blanking on me, right? Edgar Mitchell.
Uh-huh.
Before even had his big transformative event where he went into consciousness studies after that. But this was prior to it. And he said, no, I don't really believe in UFOs. And so that's just one of many that's within his archives. So as we were going through it, funny enough, everything just started interweaving for me. I had received a case whenever I was back with another organization of a schoolyard encounter that happened in 1975, and I can go into that here in a bit. But it happened in Hartshorn, Oklahoma, and come to find out, Hayden had been investigating Hartshorn since the 1950s. He was out there in 1950s, 60s, 70s, working in conjunction with several of the locals and recording all of these mass sightings. And this is just a small town of 2,000 people. It's remained unchanged for, the last 60, 70 years. I think the official population is 2001, and it was in the 60s, and it is today. So,
just so people out there know, in a historical context, back in those days, there was no internet, there were no cell phones, there were no computers. And if you wanted to keep in touch with people, you sent a letter with a stamp on it. Of course, the stamps were only what, 2 or 3 cents a stamp. But that's how you had to do it. And you had to wait a week before they got it, and then they would answer you, and it would take another week to get back. And
it would drive me crazy.
Yeah, so just so everybody knows, because people don't even know how to dial an old school phone anymore or read an analog clock. So it was very different back then.
It was. Thank you, John. And it wasn't even on computers. It was on old school typewriters, and what was it? The dot matrix that you would actually print things out. And so there's all kinds of stuff from the different eras that we've gone through relating back to all of these different investigations. So it's pretty cool. I know now whenever I send a letter via email, that I even have a deal on there that sends us a read receipt. So I know if someone's opened it, and, I can expect that they're probably going to respond back pretty quickly. And to not know if your letter actually arrived where it was supposed to go, and if that person's ever going to write back. But in doing that old way, we have all of those original letters, and he kept copies of everything he sent and everything he received. And so we have such a wonderful archive of all the things that he was doing. Are you having troubles, John?
No, I was just reading the comment thing.
Oh, okay. What was it?
Oh, no, I was just rearranging my screen and
Okay.
making it larger.
I was just making sure I wasn't babbling over someone's question. Anyways, so we have all of those in the archives. And what's so cool about that is we can transfer that now over into the digital age. Now that we can make it all digital, we can pull the information from all of those letters and all those forms and make it searchable. So that's what we're in the process of doing with the archive now, is making it searchable. So if there's one thing in particular someone wants to look up, they can look up all of it. I know that whenever I was going through it physically and trying to sort it, there was a big file on Aurora, which I know Jim Mars was very involved in that investigation down in Texas, because it's right outside of Dallas. And Hayden was actually down there with him in the 70s and investigating. They did some testing of the well water. They located the original burial plot where it was said that a person not of this world was buried. So there were different things that he was able to document back then. And I just, in sifting through the files, I was able to put together a file on it and share that with Daniel Allen Jones, who has now taken over Jim Mars's archive. And so he has access to all of Hayden's notes from that. And I'm hoping that that'll help him in his research for that one particular case. But that's the goal, is to get these important documents into the hands of researchers that are trying to put all the different pieces of the puzzle together, and especially in their specific things that they are focusing on. That's the only way we're going to get better answers.
You know, I love the fact that these are very sensitive documents that have come down through history, and we sometimes don't go back to the past. And for you to archive such wonderful material that has been given to you by the collection of him going out there and doing the field work, the investigation, that's what John is up to with the Native American communities out there investigating people's story and encouraging them to share the story and put them in a safe archive. And that's pretty much what the special projects for the indigenous side of things. So John, would you like to share something?
Yeah, one of the things that I was going to mention is that in doing an investigation, there's a way to do it, and we used to take the federal route on writing our reports. So all our reports are double spaced; they're written in third person. So you don't say, I did this, I did that. It's Jonathan Dover did this, because the person reading the report may not know who I is. And then it's broken down into, synopsis, narrative. You have all your witnesses, what they can attest to. All the names in the report are bolded, so you can find them easily. And you double space it so that your prosecutor has room to write notes in. Now, about the notes, and it's really important to understand that when you do an investigation, I usually carry a blank small notebook, and I'll write my notes and details in that notebook and then transfer what I think is relevant to the report. When I put the case file in, the notebook goes with it. So don't write your girlfriend's names and phone numbers and other things, because in a court system, that's discoverable. And you don't want the jury to be seeing all your little doodles on the side. But notes can be extremely valuable, because a lot of times, to streamline the report, they'll leave some of those notes out. And to get those original notes is like a gold mine to future investigators. So my recommendation is keep some notes, put it in with the file, and hang on to it.
Absolutely. Well, and that's what we're trying to do with our database, is make a place where we can put all of those notes together, and make it to where it, again, is searchable. And we have different fields that are kind of required and kind of highlighted for each different type of case that we'll be investigating. And right now we're working on the back end on our report intake to make it extremely simplified, where someone can report a UFO in 2 minutes and just go, and click the boxes. And then we have enough information to begin our investigation, and then be able to identify whether it is a misidentification or if it remains unknown after our certain amount of checks that we normally do. And so we have the basic UFOs, and of course we have like the cattle mutilations and the crop circles and abductions. Those are things different. They involve different types of things that we need to ask the witness or the experiencer. And then the other side is the indigenous side, how to approach that line of questioning with respect and in cultural context. And then also the first responders, which you are too, John, you're kind of on both sides. So the first responders also, we have to make sure that we're using the right lingo that they understand. I come from a nursing background, so being an ICU nurse, I could help you, on the medical side, but I don't know what exactly to ask on the first responder side. So we have people like yourself. We have Master Sergeant Dustin Hendricks from here in Oklahoma City. We have the UAPPD with Mary Ann Robb and Dave Rich that are helping out on that side. So we've really been very fortunate in bringing together some of the best people in the field to come together, share their knowledge, and be able to discuss things from, okay, well, this is what we're seeing on the indigenous side. This is what we're seeing over on the first responder side. And I think that what we're going to see is kind of goes along with the Bureau motto is understanding the past, which is our archives, and understanding what was put in there. Eliminating the past, understanding the present, and then guiding the future. So if we can all come together to get a better understanding of what's truly transpiring today and how that has changed from what has happened in the past, which a lot of that largely is going to come from the indigenous stories or traditional stories that are out there, that we can bring that better understanding to what's happening today, and then be able to help inform the first responders and how to respond to mass sighting events. It's only a matter of time. And that ties back into, again, Hartshorn and the 1965 flap that happened here across the central U.S. First responders didn't know how to respond to it. Hayden Hewes was actually out there with the police and watching these things. And how do you prevent mass panic? Would that even be a factor in today's society? Or are people going to get like, that's probably drones, not even give it a second thought? Those are the things we need to start to understand, because like I said, it's only a matter of time before there's another mass event where there are multiple thousands of people that are seeing something, and we need to know how to respond appropriately.
Yeah, you had gone on season 19, I do believe, episode 5 of Ancient Aliens, and you spoke about the event. And could you kind of elaborate a little bit of what you said on that show?
Well, yeah, I could elaborate a whole lot more.
Yeah.
Hartshorn, Oklahoma. So like I had said, the original report that came in was through an organization I worked with before. And even after closing out that case for them, the witnesses stayed in contact with me. The family members of this case stayed in contact with me. And so this has been an ongoing investigation for nearly 5 years for me. And of course, it tied right back into Hayden Hewes. That's how I actually found his archive. Was looking up more about the history of Hartshorn, came across Hayden Hewes, and then here's this gold mine of information that would have been lost to time. And thankfully, his widow was kind enough to gift that to me and to entrust me with restarting the Bureau. So the original Hartshorn report that came in that I described on Ancient Aliens was a schoolyard encounter that happened in 1975. And it was a group of, I want to say 18, 19 kids, and that included 2 adults. The people that owned the school, it was like a boarding school of sorts. So 11 of the kids belonged to the Buchanan family. The mother and father had started it. They had started multiple schools in different locations, but the one in southeastern Oklahoma, they had bought 6,000 acres out there in just kind of the foothills of the Ozarks, and had a ranch, operating ranch going on there. And like I said, 11 of the kids were the Buchanan children, and they spanned from 16 down to newborn. Then there were a couple of sibling groups that had moved in as well and were living there and going to school there. So the kids lived there, they worked on the ranch, and they went to school there. So it was all kind of self-contained. And when the event happened, the kids were outside playing, and it was a couple of brothers that were out there, and one had noticed it off in the distance. It was a large a craft kind of hovering way in the distance. And as they saw it getting closer and closer, they saw that it was a saucer, and it was silver, and it had lights rotating around the center of it. And this was over the course of a couple of hours that it took to move in closer and closer to them. So this wasn't something that just flew by quickly. They were watching it, and all the other kids were starting to take notice, and they're getting excited. And they go in and they tell the Buchanan mother and the teacher, which the teacher was only 18. So she was pretty much just a kid herself. But they came out, saw the kids, really excited. And they were standing there, and about 60 feet away from them, there was a tree, and they were watching it. It hovered right over that group of trees right in front of them, not too far off the ground, and it was silent. And one of the oldest Buchanan boy, his name was Cliff, he climbed up on top of the schoolhouse and aimed his rifle at the UFO because he was scared, and he was trying to protect the women and children. So the way it was laid out, he was in behind, the women and children were in front of him down on the ground, and then the UFO was in front of them. So he was aiming over the women and children at this thing. Well, as soon as he did, they said that it flipped up onto its side. It made kind of a vacuum noise, flipped up on its side, and then it shot off to the direction of where they had the sawmill on that property. And then Cliff said that he saw it kind of land back down. The kids were freaked out. So the adults rounded them up, got them inside the schoolhouse, and shut the door. And Cliff actually started boarding up the windows and doors. And he was standing guard with his rifle. And the teacher, when I interviewed her, she said that the kids were actually hiding under the beds. She was having to pull them out and kind of console them. And they all slept in the living room that night. Well, she said sometime during the middle of the night, everything fell silent. Mm-hmm. And that's when she knew it was over. The kids had been peeking out the window, and they kept saying that they were seeing entities out there. And when she would ask them to describe what it looked like, they just said that it kept changing. And so, in our language, it would be some kind of shape-shifting entity that they were seeing. And after everything went silent, it was kind of like that Oz effect. Then everything quit. That next morning they got up, and the kids all remember packing sack lunches to go on a field trip. So the teacher actually got them out sandwiches and chips and, gave them their brown bags and an apple, and they went up and looked for the UFO. Well, when they got up there, it was gone, and they didn't really see anything around that area. So they decided, okay, well, let's walk back. And they said it was about a mile or so away, but that was still on their land. That's how much land they had. So they walked back. The teacher went to the outdoor meat locker to get some of the frozen meat out to prepare for dinner. And when she opened it up, all the meat was gone. And she said there was about 2 sides of beef in there. So by that evening, Mr. Buchanan, I know.
I think that's
this
great.
is the only case I've ever heard of, processed beef being missing. So when Mr. Buchanan came home that night, she told him, and they went to look the next day. The meat had been returned. And he said, no way in heck are you using that. So he actually took it out in the middle of the field and burned it. And the kids remember eating a lot of oatmeal that week because they had burned up all of the meat. But the thing that got me on that, and that's pretty much the gist of the schoolyard encounter. But like I said, it led into so many other avenues that we're looking into. That this is just an ongoing case. I don't know if we'll ever be able to resolve it. The oldest boy, Clifton, was actually found murdered there a few years later. The Buchanan family moved on, and they moved down to Texas. And this is stuff that I haven't released yet, but it's upcoming. And the Buchanan family, I've spoken with them, and they've been very gracious. His murder remains unsolved. And so that's one aspect that I've been working with someone trying to look into it and get some answers for their family. I don't know if it's tied into the UFO thing or not, because the Buchanan family, they shut down the schoolhouse that next year, and most of them moved back. But since Cliff was the oldest, he stayed behind to kind of care for the cattle and everything that was there. But yeah, unfortunately, they found him murdered. And I would really love to see justice for this family and to get some answers for them, because it's been 40 years or so since this has all transpired. And in the mix of all this, the sightings continue out there in Hartshorn. They started back in the 50s, and they're still going on today. And I've been out there a couple of times over the last couple of years. I was out there 2 weeks ago, and there was a gentleman down by the local lake fishing. I said, hey, you ever see anything out here? And he goes, oh yeah, every night we see them. They come up over this little hill and they buzz around, and then they take off. It's no secret here. So it's well known in that area, but still no answers as to where it's coming from or why it's in that area.
Were there any cases of abduction pronounced with any of those kids for going further on into their lives? I mean, it sounds to me like the possibility of them coming back, there's something there for them.
You know, I asked that whenever I was doing the interviews with them, and there were only a handful of the kids that I was able to actually contact. The ones that I did speak with, they haven't had any ongoing abductions. So I don't know if they were just witness to an event that was going on because of the location, and it didn't really have anything to do with them. But it still was quite frightening for them. And all of them recall pretty much the same story, even though they hadn't had contact throughout all of those years. They remember, and especially the teacher. She had a lot to put in, and she's a respected doctor today. And she remembers everything about it from more of an adult perspective. So it was wonderful to speak with her and to have that confirmation from an adult side of view, you know, to kind of add to what the kids remembered. So, and it confirmed everything they said.
One of the things that occur to me is that you said everybody was frightened, and it would be a normal thing. Because back in those days, in the 50s and the early 60s, every movie that came out was about aliens coming to conquer us. They're coming to destroy us. You know, you have War of the Worlds, you have radio shows that were very similar. And you know, at the time, there was the communist menace. And so the aliens kind of take the place of other powers or other world leaders trying to dominate the world and spread their ideology. And so this was our media way of saying, watch out, beware, they're going to come for you. And so, yeah, you know, I can picture somebody grabbing a gun and saying, I'm gonna fight, because that's what you did in the movie. Otherwise, you get killed.
That's excellent insight. And well, and also to lend to someone grabbing a gun, this is southeastern Oklahoma. So I would not recommend anyone go out poking around southeastern Oklahoma and them hills. It's not a welcoming place. You know, people are nice enough during the day, but you don't go wandering off in the backwoods if you don't know someone there. It's not the place to be, honestly. It is a dangerous thing.
That's a really good PSA. One of the things that Stan talks about, that he's told me about, is when he was in elementary school, for show and tell, he brought a rifle, a .22 rifle to school. And everybody went, ooh, you know, that would be unheard of today. But he grew up in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. And he said carrying a rifle, you know, back in those days was nothing. Everybody had
for a
one.
kid. Yeah. And I know that I don't even want to get into that side of things, but yes, that's very much eastern and especially southeastern Oklahoma. And I say that with love because my own father lives down in that area. So I'm some of those hill folk, but yeah, it's not a good place to just go poking around and asking about UFOs if you don't know someone there. But we're still looking into it. The tie back to Hayden back in the 60s with there was a woman named Alta Claire Morgan that lived there, and she actually had been one of the very first people to have a sighting back during that major flap that happened from July 1st or July 31st through August 2nd of 1965. Alticlaire had reported a UFO on July 26th, so a few days before, and had written into Hayden at the Bureau and said, look, I was up close and personal with this UFO, and I know that they're real, and I'm seeing them almost every night now. And so she actually had joined the Bureau and started writing for him. And so there was an interplanetary intelligence report that he put out, and there were several articles by Alticlaire Morgan in there. She actually had started, she was the wife of the postmaster there in town, and she had started having sky watches there at her home. And actually, a couple of years ago when I was out there, I was invited to come over to her granddaughters, who now owns Alticlaire's old house, and have a big sky watch like they used to back in the 60s. So it was such a really cool thing to be able to take part in that, just like they were doing so many years ago. But Alticlaire had recorded, I think over like a 5-month period, she had recorded 110 sightings out of a town of 2,000 people. And I mean, that's significant. It's significant because I know how many reports came in across the entire state of Oklahoma year after year after year with other organizations. And it wasn't 110. And this was just in one town in 5 months. So that's saying a lot. But that it goes back to that kicking off that massive flap, which a lot of people don't even know about. That happened there in 65. But it included the Tulsa Boy Scout photo, which was investigated by the Bureau and by Hayden back then. And then it was picked up by Project Blue Book and investigated. It was ultimately closed out. The Boy Scout photo itself was closed out as a hoax by Blue Book. And I almost want to say they were right. Because they said that it looked like one of the old Christmas tree filter lights that you would sit up, and it would kind of rotate between the primary colors and shine up onto the old tinsel trees, right? And it looks pretty darn close to that. I actually have a slide on one of my presentations where it shows the comparison. I really think that Blue Book got that one right, but it does not discount the thousands and thousands of sightings across 7 different states during that 3-day period in 65. And so, I mean, it had New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas had a airline that was flying over that actually had a close encounter during that flight. Missouri, Arkansas, all of these surrounding states were having mass sightings during that 3 days, and it was reported nationally, but it's really not talked about now. My own mother was actually a witness to it here in Oklahoma City during that time in 1965. Her and my aunt were out watching. They were laying out on my grandpa's old Ford and looking up, and then here, lo and behold, here's a saucer floating right over the country in the backyard. And they saw it very close. And that's something she had always said to me. So to find out that then there's this huge flap that her sighting was actually a part of kind of blew my mind. I said, well, Mom, it was part of this. You didn't even tell me all this other stuff was going on at the time. But she didn't really have an interest in UFOs. So, but yeah, the sightings just rolled in. And Hayden was actually there with the police watching them during that time because he was heading up the Bureau, and he's like, well, I better get out there. And he was seeing them all over the skies as well. So I have that up on International UFO Bureau.com, and on my personal website, MindyTautfest.com, has kind of a more expanded version of Hartshorn, but they all tie together. It's kind of mind-blowing. Everything kind of leads back to Hartshorn.
You know, Mindy, go ahead.
I was going to say, just so our audience understands, a flap, we throw out these terms, and, a lot of people that study and research and investigate UFOs know these terms. But for everybody's information, a flap is a period of time when there are a lot of sightings suddenly, and then it goes away. And during our time investigating up on the Navajo reservation, we saw flaps occur where things would be quiet for sometimes months. And then all of a sudden you had a whole rash of UFO sightings or even Bigfoot sightings. And then it would trickle off and then go away again. And so they're kind of normal. And if you hear about a UFO flap in a particular area, that's the time to get out there with your binoculars and your camera equipment and set up your tripod and wait.
Yeah, waiting and observing. You know, you talked about history and the first flap that you guys occurred during 1965. In 65 was around the 5-year old. I was up at Kirkland Air Force Base in kindergarten, and I got to see during the space program the astronauts coming through Loveless Hospital. They're getting their physical. So I was able to see a lot of things at 5 that most people didn't see. And my mother worked for a full-bred colonel at Kirkland Air Force Base. And what was really interesting, I have these photos in my mind that go back to my history of 65. And then the question I've always asked, and I still ask it today, is it them or us? And this account that you spoke of, this mass sighting, for the meat to disappear and then reappear, is, to me, I'm recounting that was them, you know. And I always ask the question, when I was on Skinwalker Ranch, there was a member of the NIDS community. And I would always ask him, is this real or is this not real? And he goes, you can't tell anymore. The lines have blurred now. So when we do investigations, we've got to be so precise today, because you know what's going to happen? I think AI is going to come in and decipher for us.
It absolutely is. And that's one thing I am so excited about. We are in an era now that we've never been at, you know, in recorded history. There might have been before, but, you know, since this last iteration, we haven't had these capabilities. And the way that it can filter through information so quickly and to find patterns and things, I think that we are going to find so much once we get all of the information structured within our database and we're able to start running our queries. We've already got a list of the top 100 queries that we're going to put in immediately. But you bring up cryptids. One of the major sightings down there around the Hartshorn area, again, was where it was along the Talamina Drive down there. It's beautiful down in southeastern Oklahoma. But there was actually a newspaper article that talks about a craft landing and then a short, hairy humanoid seen outside of it. And they were actually trying to chase this thing around. It was around Christmas time. And so you have the Hark the Herald Angels Sing, you know, and then right next to it's this little hairy guy next to a UFO, which is just strange, but you know, that's small town newspapers. But that's one thing that we want to look at is the cryptid aspect of it and not rule anything out. We don't know what's involved until we do know. And so to cut out any part of it until we can gather the information and see if there really is a correlation, which we know correlation doesn't equal causation or vice versa. You know, we've got to take in all the information and see what it tells us, not what we want it to tell us. If that makes sense.
Yeah, interpretation of our own minds. So what we experience from our experiences, we can interpret based on what we think it is. But I think we're getting so precise. And John will tell you in his law enforcement years, they had to be very factual. And I think we're getting to coming to that era of facts. And I think, like I said, the lines will be very blurred. And there are correlations. Dr. Segala and I, when we put our MUPA's program out there, we're finding correlations to the individual, not the environment. So that's a whole different subject that we can talk about. But I find it interesting. Let's talk about the 65 flap? No, we just did. What was the other one?
Yeah. I'd like to
19,
touch on what you were just talking
yeah.
about with the experiencers, because that's another whole piece of the puzzle. Is there is such a really a ridiculous factor to some of the stories that experiencers come forward with. One of the most ridiculous ones that I've heard is from one of my very best friends, Terry Lynn Kill.
Yeah.
And I know the woman is
Terry.
not a liar. I know what she said she saw and she experienced is absolutely what she saw and what she experienced. And so we have to learn to take what these experiencers are telling us at face value and learn from them. We can't come in with our own preconceived notions or what we think is right. We have to listen to them and again, hear what they're telling us and understand from their point of view. Me being a near-death experiencer, I understand the trauma that goes along with encounters where you are taken out of your environment, literally taken out of your body, or you are around non-human intelligence that you can't identify. I'm not an abductee, but I've had similar encounters and I know how strange mind sounds. And I know that I was put down quite a bit because I didn't have the traditional NDE that most Christians would have. And coming from a Christian background, I was ridiculed. And I still am. But there's my book, Dying to Meet Them. Thank you. But because I ended up in the void, is what I've now come to find that it was, I got ridiculed quite a bit because I wasn't welcomed by Jesus and I didn't immediately go into the light. I didn't have any of that. And so I have a real heart for experiencers of all types that have those really strange aspects or have run into things that were completely against what they expected. We have to take that into consideration. We have to listen to them with our full mind, with our full heart, and with our full attention, because there are aspects of these that some researchers may just kind of go, well, that's a little too out there. I'm not going to necessarily put it in there. It may discredit this story when it may be the one thing that actually lends credibility. And that's what I found time and time again working with experiencers, is that the really strange part is what tends to be the biggest, most significant part. What's up? Is that Mark D'Antonio? Hey, Mark. Oh, yeah.
We love him. We love Mark. Yes. Hi, Mark.
Yeah. I did as well whenever I stayed over there and we were working on a project together and there was a huge light. Let me tell you about this. This was so weird. And I think Mark also saw like the small shadow running across the floor whenever he was there. I saw it whenever I was there. But one night I was going to sleep there, staying in her guest room, and she has this big, huge, haunted old mansion in Tennessee, right? And I've had spirit encounters before, but nothing like what happened the night I stayed there with Terry. I was starting to drift off to sleep, and I saw what I thought was like a spotlight right outside the window, and I was up on the second floor, right on the balcony of this big house. And I looked over and saw it, and it was shining right in, like someone was holding a spotlight right up to the window. And I thought, well, that's strange. And of course, my first thought is, oh, they're playing a trick on you. Just go to sleep. So I walk up, being an investigator, I walk up to the window. I look out, I part the curtains, look out, can't see anything. This light is blinding right in my face. And again, it's a trick. Go to sleep. I did not open the window or open the door and walk 10 feet to go see if they were standing on the balcony. No, I went and just laid back down and went to sleep. And I told Terry about it the next day, and she was like, that's been reported before, and I've actually seen that light. So just the fact that it was almost like a mind control. They're playing a trick on you. Go lay down. Me being as nosy as I am, I would never, but in my right mind, I would be out there on that balcony trying to figure out what it was. And instead, I listened to the voice and went and laid back down. So I'll never know what exactly that bright light was. But yeah, I know that several, including Mark, have had encounters there at her home.
It's really interesting. We all are experiencers here. I had a craft shine a light down on me down in southern Utah. That's a longer story, but we've all had these experiences and we don't want to say anything because we think we're going to get ridiculed. And yet there's a commonality with all of us. We've seen lights, we've seen orbs, we've seen all kinds of things, correlations, the cryptids, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it. There seems to be a correlation to these experiences that we continue to have them. I know that John continues to have them and Stan continues to have them. John, would you like to share something?
Yeah, for me, and I'm going to tell you something about me that I've never told anyone except for my sister. And I can remember we used to live on Temple Street, downtown Los Angeles, right near Glendale Avenue, just up the hill. The place is gone now. It was an old house built back in 1898. And it was a 2-story, so they divided it and made 2 apartments. And I remember at maybe 7 years old, being out, we were playing all the time. We're kids. Kids go out and play. And we're playing, and there are sunflower plants in the yard. And these sunflowers, I don't know if you realize this, but they get actually huge, 15-inch diameter sunflowers with all the seeds in them. And both of us distinctly remember seeing a huge butterfly that landed on a sunflower. And this butterfly was so big, its wings covered the whole sunflower. Now,
wow,
back in those days, we just went, wow, that's cool, Never saw a butterfly that big. And I was all into bugs back then. I used to catch bugs all the time. And so that caught my attention. Years later, I think in 2006, my sister actually mentioned, do you remember that butterfly? And I said, yeah. And she says, I remember it, but I don't remember what it looked like, or, it's kind of fuzzy. And I told her, I says, it was a tiger swallow. It was yellow and black. And come to find out later that could be termed a screenshot memory, where you're seeing something, but it's presenting itself as something innocuous that freak out and just go crazy about. You won't get fearful. And they'll come to you as different types of animals, rabbits, whatever. I had one where a 3.5 to 4 foot rabbit showed up in somebody's yard, and there was evidence of it. And so, that stuck with me. I remember that, and come to find out later, one of my nephews is actually an entomologist, has his degree from Cornell University. And he basically says that bugs do not get that big. There's no way it could get that big. So, but just that incident, I remember it distinctly.
Wow. I'm as I was listening to you, I see here American Road Warrior said, I experienced a huge frog. So again, it's that almost ridiculous factor, it's almost like it's inserted a little bit to make most people disbelieve you. And I know the one encounter I did have had that ridiculous factor. The 2 things that I thought were most ridiculous were what was presented to me the one time I did have an encounter. And I haven't really spoken publicly about it, but that was kind of the tipping point for me. And I'm so glad that it happened to me early on in becoming an investigator, because then I knew. you have to just listen, because these people are not making things up. And that's the only way that we're going to understand this phenomena is, even if it is a screen memory, why is that specific person getting that screen memory? Was there something about butterflies that brought you comfort, that, made it okay? There's so many layers to what we're doing. And one thing that Michelle had brought up, there was actually a chapter in my book, a couple of chapters that goes into the encounter-prone personality. And I give a nod back to Dr. Kenneth Rain, who wrote the Omega Project, which is one of the big books sitting behind me. He's another giant in my eyes that I highly respect. He's right up there with Hayden for me. But he was actually one of the first ones back in the early 90s. He was a professor of psychology out at University of Connecticut, and he was a researcher for near-death experiences. And a colleague had given him a copy of Communion by Whitley Strieber and said, you need to read this, because this guy sounds like your near-death experiencers. And at the time, Dr. Ring said, no, I don't do UFOs. And he said, well, just humor me. So he did. And he goes, you know what? You're right. You're absolutely right. These people sound alike. So he had put together a study looking into both types of experiencers. And he came to find out that there were two main commonalities, which is, number one, the encounter-prone personality, which is what I believe you're referring to, Michelle, in a roundabout way. It seems to be those of us that have the majority of us have had some kind of childhood trauma, or we have an inborn ability that's been fostered by someone around us. And we've learned how to dissociate to the point of excluding the environment around us. So we are completely immersed in an alternate reality, and we're able to send our consciousness to connect with entities in this other realm. And so it tends to be with those of us that are experiencers. We have learned at a very early age of how to do that and to put our minds in contact with it. So for me, it was a lot of spirit encounters, shadow beings, things of that sort, until the near-death experience. And then I started seeing lights in the sky and stuff. So it kind of morphs, but I think that it remains consistent throughout most types of experiencers. They've had some kind of event in their life where they've learned how to dissociate to that point. And one of the things Dr. Ring did was he differentiated between people that were fantasy prone and people that were encounter prone. So the people that were encounter prone were found to not score high at all on the fantasy side of things. We weren't making up things, and living in kind of a make-believe realm. We were connecting with something. So there was two very different outcomes for those two types. What's up, John?
We are just about out of time, and man, we didn't even scratch the surface.
Oh, no.
We've got to have you back for a part two. And
absolutely.
Well, actually, we do. We have her scheduled in May, and we're looking for a upcoming rebill from Mindy and the organization from the International.
I think I'll be largely silent during that interview, though.
Yeah. Because there's another special guest coming on with you, right? And
yes.
So, Dawn, you hit it on the button. But everybody, we appreciate you being on our show. We didn't even scratch the surface of, because we have these conversations with one another and we share our experiences. But I want to do a shout out to Mark D'Antonio. We would love to have you on this show as well. We're all acquainted with you. Get in touch with either John or me, and I'd love to have you on too. And but Mindy, we appreciate you being on our show today. I wish we could go longer, but you know how it is with schedules. And
I know how we are. But behind the scenes, we stay on the phone for 2 and 3 hours.
Yes, we
multiple
do.
times a week. So
we have so much commonalities. We've all had similar experiences, but but we are a safe place for one another, and always know the audience out there is a safe place with us as well. No judgment. We listen to your stories. We understand. You can contact us at the Native Paranormal Rangers at gmail.com if you ever want to share your story or contact one of us. We appreciate everyone being here, and have a great day, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, John.